Und wir freuen uns jetzt auf den Geschäftsführer der Baltic Werft und seine Ideen, wie man eben diese grünen Technologien implementieren kann in den Segelyachtbau. Herzlich willkommen oder tervetuola an Anders KURTÉN.
Thank you, thank you. Dear friends, I'm going to have to cap a rumor, first of all. Sailing is not dead, nor do I believe that it is about to die anytime soon. However, I'm actually really happy to be speaking after Harald, because in my humble opinion, there's really one main reason of existence for superyachts. Do you know what that reason is? That reason is to put a smile on the owner's face. And as Harald was smiling a lot during his presentation, and you could really sort of sense the pride that he takes in his, for lack of a better word, baby. I think that is great testament to any yard that can have happy customers like that. They should really, really be proud. But today, I'm really here to tell you a story about how a humble local boat yard became a global leader in building sustainable sailing superyachts. At the same time, I'm going to try to share with you our systematic approach to sustainability, which we have been following for the last 4 or 5 years or so. But to begin with, another misconception: we are actually not in the industry of building boats or yachts. We as an industry and we as a company are really in the business of delivering dreams, which is actually much, much harder to do. When you look at the marketing materials and advertisements for larger yachts, they really aren't particularly transactionally oriented. There's no buy now button on the website, nor are the prices widely advertised. Rather, they tell stories, they reinforce brand identities, and they fuel dreams. Now, these dreams, they vary in size, yet the sea is really the same for all, whether you experience it from a kayak or a superyacht. Now, every boat or yacht, as it may be, represents the ultimate dream of personal freedom, which is why so many of us have the dream boat as our screensaver on our laptop, because that dream helps you get through the day and sometimes even helps you get through adversity, of which there has been plenty over these last 2 years. But what we see happening globally is that these superyacht dreams, especially those of the sailing kind, they're really changing shape. Sustainability has become quite paramount. We on average build about 1.8 boats per year over the last 10 years. So you may ask, why does this matter? Let me tell you why. We estimate that our potential clients, they represent about 0.003%. That is 0.003% of the global population. But this particular niche group, if you will, holds 13% of all the assets globally. And this is why it matters, because they have a disproportionate effect through their spending habits, also on the environment. And additionally, in many cases, they are thought leaders, opinion shapers of their own kind that regular people like you and me, in some cases, look up to and even emulate and follow. After this brief introduction, here's what I'm going to share with you today. I'm going to talk a little bit about our history, because to understand the present, you really need to understand sort of where we have come from. I'm going to share with you who we feel we have become now that we have grown up, almost 50 years old, the company is. Then I'm going to try to share with you our approach to sustainability, because there is really no international standard as to how you measure a company in any industry as to how sustainable they are. So as stubborn Finns, we decided to develop our own. So I'm going to share that with you and also talk a little bit about how we actually measure progress there. Then I'm going to share with you a couple of select cases, a few projects that we have recently launched, and maybe sort of not talk too much in specific about those yachts, because for a lot of obvious reasons we can't go into a lot of detail on them, but maybe highlight the sort of sustainable aspects of various recent launches. Then I'm going to leave a little bit of time at the end if you have any questions or comments related to stuff that I have shared with you. But now, for a history lesson, ancient history lesson. Sailing really fundamentally is the original form of sustainable transportation. The first recorded notions of working sailing boats, they go back some 6,500 years ago. We're not going to go that far, but before being briefly a Grand Duchy of Russia between the 1800s and 1917, when Finland became independent, fortunately, especially given recent events, we belonged to Sweden for hundreds of years. And the area where we are located on the west coast, called Jakobstad, on the maps from the 1600s, it actually didn't say Jakobstad. It said Hic Fabricator Navalis, which for those of you fluent in Latin means ships are built here. So we have hundreds and hundreds of years of heritage and history of building ships mainly for the export markets. Ships like the Vanadis here, built in 1874. This heritage meant that we have the craftsmen and the history and the tradition readily available in our region. There was a big disruption in the late 1800s when new technologies, such as steam, replaced sailing as the primary means of propulsion. And for the longest time, it was actually thought that this frigate, launched in 1874 from a location less than 1 kilometer from where our yard currently is, would be the last sailing ship to ever be built in the region. Until almost 100 years later, in 1973, 5, at the time, young men left their nice, safe jobs at another one of our neighbors, Nautor's Swan, to start their own company, to fulfill their dream, to build boats according to a very particular Baltic Yachts philosophy: lighter, stiffer, faster, utilizing the best technologies available at the time. And this led to composite construction, and it led to an attempt to build every boat as light as possible, which now, 50 years later, is quite fortunate for us, because this light construction gives us the foundation, everything else being equal, to create more sustainable products. Because a lighter boat needs less energy to move, however that energy is generated. I'm not trying to sell you on composite boat building. I'm just trying to share sort of our philosophy, the way we look at yachts as a product. In our view, a lighter boat, obviously faster, accelerates better, gives you easier handling, and allows you to combine the best of both worlds, both reasonable comfort and good performance. You get reduced loads, you get less maintenance, and a lighter displacement is a more easily driven hull, whether you're sailing or motoring. We've also pioneered technologies in the sailboat building industry. We started vacuum lamination in the 70s. We built teak decks as a structural part of the actual deck stiffening already in the late 70s. The 80s saw us build the first maxis using epoxy and carbon fiber. In the mid-90s, we started using pre-pregs, and the early 2000s saw us launch the first 100-plus footer. Some of you may have seen the boat around here. It's a 147-footer called Visione, which still, actually 20 years after its launch, is a light, stiff, and technologically, considering the build technology, is reasonably advanced yacht. 2011 saw us launch the largest carbon boat ever built, the 197-foot Hetairos, and 2019 was another milestone when we launched the 142-footer Canova, which I'm going to cover more in detail slightly later. Now, you have to understand, I'm not an engineer. I have a degree in economics, so the following is not from a naval architecture perspective. It's rather trying to, in a very simple way, exemplify what we call the virtuous circle design philosophy. What do you get when you build a boat lighter, apart from it becoming stiffer and faster? Let's say, for argument's sake, a hypothetical project, we managed to save 2 tons in hull and structures by using directional fibers, carbon fiber, optimized laminates, whatever. This allows us to save 3 tons, ballpark, in the ballast and keel. Now we've saved 5 tons, which is actually quite a lot in boat building. Usually you go the other way, right? This allows us to put a lighter mast, smaller rig package on the boat, further reducing the overall displacement and affecting performance favorably, because weight high up, not only, as Carlos said, makes the boat look ugly, it's actually worse to have it high up than to have it low down, especially on a sailing boat. Thus, we can put smaller deck gear, cheaper, lighter. We can put a smaller engine. And at the end of the day, actually, we generate less waste because we use less raw materials when we build the boat lighter. So this is really what we call the virtuous circle Baltic design philosophy, if you will. And amazingly enough, almost 50 years later, we are still at it. And today, some would consider us leaders in sustainable, custom, advanced carbon composite sailing superyachts. And today, as was mentioned in the introduction, our value proposition through evolution has become lighter, stiffer, faster, greener, together. This together portion really for us refers to the Baltic family, as we like to call it. The immediate family being our employees, some 230 of them, a little over 200 up in Finland, and 25 down in Palma at our refit facility. 40% of our employees have been with the company for 20 years or more. 20% of our employees have been with the company for 30 years or more. Just before Christmas, I sent our head of R&D into well-deserved retirement. He joined the company in 1978, the same year roughly that Spain became a democracy and Garfield, the comic strip, first saw the light of day. And customers generally tend to come to us for our passion and innovation to fuel, these days, their sustainable dreams. Not forgetting trying to making them smile at the end of the day at delivery. Sustainability then. For us, by and large, generally, it's really managing and myopically focusing on multiple small details. And all these small details combined create a big impact. There is no single silver bullet that will solve this equation, not really in any industry. And in our own conceptual framework that we have developed through trial and error and stubbornness and time and tobacco, this really focuses on 3 main areas. The first one being consistently reducing the environmental impact and footprint of our yard operations, of our production. And here really the key is to measure again, reset the metrics as you realize that you're measuring the wrong things, and then continuing to measure. The second thing is to try to use organic materials wherever that is feasible and possible. And the third thing that really supports these 2 more quantifiable measures is a variety of soft things that are more designed and catered to make this relevant in the everyday work of the immediate Baltic family, that is, our employees. So that's the first component, reducing the yard operations environmental footprint. The second component, which is also really, really important because our boats, I think we've built about 600 boats through the years, and to our knowledge, actually most of them still float and are in use, is to minimize the total life cycle emissions of these yachts as they are sailing. And here we have a couple of key technologies that I'm going to discuss superficially but in more depth in a little moment. And here really hybrid electrical propulsion is at the heart and soul of making this possible. The third thing is trying to reduce the life cycle emissions of these yachts when at a standstill, when they're not moving by their own sails. And here really we have 2 main components. One is harnessing solar power, and the second one is designing the systems efficiently so that we reduce consumption on board. And this has not changed. As long as we have had electricity on any kind of vessels, especially sailing boats, the key has really been to try to solve it on the consumption side rather than the storage or production side, because it's much easier and it gives you benefits over the entire life cycle of the yacht. If we talk about what we've actually done in terms of reducing the yard operations footprint, this is a continuous challenge. And like I said before, it's many, many small trickles. But I'm going to give you a few examples of the sort of bigger ticket items that we have done. And then I'm going to share with you the metrics of how we measure our progress there. First of all the electricity that we use is from local wind farms. So it's roughly about as green as it can get. We've switched away from fossil fuels for heating. We use pellets instead. When I left Finland yesterday morning, it was -22. You can't build boats in -20, you gotta heat the sheds. So this is a significant energy hog for an operation that is located in central Finland. We have also done quite a lot of work to try to analyze our waste streams, and we are quite proud because we have recently reached 0 unsorted waste as a byproduct of production. And we also track waste as a function of all the labor hours produced. So we measure how much waste per labor hour, and we have managed to reduce that by about 10% annually for the last 3 years. All our production tooling is made from recyclable materials. But once again, and this I cannot stress enough, what you measure is what you get. After a bunch of trial and error and some mistakes, we have landed at about 20 different parameters that we track to gauge progress and make sure that we are going in the right direction. And then annually, we convert all these into CO2 equivalents according to somehow globally accepted impact analysis tools. The main things that we measure: heating, where we have transitioned away from fossil fuels to pellets annually and by project. Electricity, we went to green energy, I think it was late 20. Tracked annually, tracked per project. All the lighting in both production facilities moving away from fluorescent lights to LEDs. All the company ICE units, whether they're vans or forklifts or generators, these days run on biodiesel. And then waste tracking, total amounts divided into different categories, unsorted waste, waste per hour of labor. And all this is put into a great big Excel annually and then converted to CO2 equivalents. Would you like to see where this has gotten us? Now I need a more enthusiastic response. You are not Finns. Good? Much better. Here we have the figures from 18, 19, and 20. In 18, which was the first year where we really felt that we had the metrics roughly right, we did about 1,400 tons of CO2 equivalents. In 19, which was a cold year, and before we had transitioned to green electricity, we did 1,200 tons. 2020, which was the first year when we had the full impact of wind farm electricity and pellet heating, we had managed to reduce that to 400 tons, which is a reduction of 2/3. Now, granted, this was the COVID pandemic, so the impact of travel was less. But the interesting thing, what you see here really, when you look at the proportions, purple being heating, blue being electricity, green being basically everything else, is that the proportions there have completely shifted, which also helps us. Now we know where we need to focus over the next couple of years, which is to reduce this green portion, which is now 70% of our total CO2 emissions. And just to give you some kind of a sort of frame of reference, it was about 2016, when we started sort of systematically looking at this. So 2 years of trial and error with the metrics and the parameters before we nailed the way that we now currently measure it. Organic materials then, as an option. There's a number of interesting materials already out there and viable. We can use cork to replace teak in the teak decking, as we did on the 68 Cafe Racer. When you're more than 10 feet away, you can't really tell the difference. very durable, actually even more pleasant underfoot than teak. We can use flax, an organic material, to replace carbon fiber in structures. And to our knowledge, the 68 is actually the largest flax boat ever built. It has 51% of flax in hull and structures instead of carbon fiber. And to give you an idea of the sort of maturity and length of time that it takes to actually, from when you start experimenting with this stuff, when you actually move it into production. The first boat that we ever had flax on was the 130 Maison, which some of you may have heard of. Sadly, one of the boats that is no longer with us, where we had flax in non-structural interior panels. So it takes about 6-7 years in our experience when you start looking at something, if it seems viable to actually move it into full-scale production in structural parts. However, the quantum leap here is yet to come, in my personal opinion. There is a process called solvolysis. Once again, I'm not an engineer. I have a business background. So solvolysis for me is you take acetone on steroids, you take heat, you take pressure, and then you take a piece of cured composite laminate, put it all together into a vat, and hey presto, it dissolves the resin and gives you recycled carbon fiber. This is already a stable process which works well in the lab, so I'm hopeful that over the next 5, 6, 7 years there will be a supply chain built around this. And probably already within the next 2 or 3 years we will start experimenting with non-structural parts built from recycled carbon fiber. And this will be a game changer in terms of the environmental impact of big carbon composite structures. Soft measures then. What we do is we offer employees free EV charging just to encourage the personal green transition. We offer them subventioned e-bikes, and we run a mileage competition biannually. So don't take your car to work, take your bike to work. We log the kilometers, and then for shits and giggles, as they would say in America, we convert that to CO2 equivalents as well. Not put into the sort of big Excel that I shared with you earlier, but once again, to make it relevant in your everyday. What can you personally do to create some kind of an impact? We also do annually an employee engagement contest where we try to get ideas from production as to how could we further reduce our environmental impact. And to encourage people to actually give suggestions, we usually have a lottery every year. Last year, we gave out a 4-meter aluminum runabout. Now, this boat has an internal combustion engine. The one that the happy employee won actually had a Torqeedo electric engine on it. And if you wondered, yes, that's me. But it's an old picture, so my boat handling skills have improved since. Anyways, on to life cycle emissions. We've covered the first area, reducing the yard environmental footprint. For this, really, 2019 for us was a huge milestone. We launched the 142-footer Canova, a hybrid electric boat with hydrogeneration, who also won the 2020 World Superyacht Awards. It's a big boat. The heart and soul of the boat is a 210 kilowatt-hour battery bank, which basically powers everything on board. She has a silent period at night of about 9 hours. She can do 6 hours at half throttle under electricity only. She does have diesel generators as backup, but this is a boat that can actually cross the Atlantic with full hotel load, AC running, restaurant food served for every meal, without burning a single drop of fossil fuel, potentially saving you hundreds and hundreds of liters of diesel over the course of a single crossing. Now, hydrogeneration, for those of you who have driven electric cars, you know that when you drive an electric car, you put your foot off the accelerator, the car starts slowing down because it's regenerating. This is really the marine equivalent of that. When we have an electric motor as the primary means of propulsion, we can use that same motor to actually generate electricity. And here's what the hardware looks like. You have the drive leg, you have the electrical motor, which is installed up there. And this example here, blue one is charging, black one is boat speed. This is from Canova. when she was on her maiden voyage down from Jakobstad, Finland, to the Mediterranean, doing about 14 knots of boat speed in the Bay of Biscay. And at that speed, she's generating about 17, 18 kilowatts stable, which makes her completely self-sufficient at an average cruising speed for that type displacement size of boat. So we're not claiming that she's zero emissions, but when she's sailing, she actually is zero emissions. And this is a further picture of the hardware. It's a Danish manufacturer called Handested who actually makes the drive leg, and it's got actually two additional features. First of all, it's retractable, so if you go racing, you can pull the drive leg into the hull, so zero drag. And second of all, it also rotates, so it doubles as a stern drive. So once again, we save weight, we eliminate one redundant, complex additional system on the boat, which is weight-wise and performance-wise in the wrong place in the stern of the boat. We have other invisible benefits to hybrid propulsion. One of the biggest ones is actually silence. On our recently launched 117, we measure 42 decibel in the owner's cabin under full throttle. This is not doable with traditional internal combustion engine-based propulsion. We also get a silent period at night, which, depending on the boat and the number of cabins air-conditioned, ranges from anywhere between 8 to 12 hours in reality. The Cafe Racer is probably the most sustainable boat that we have ever built. She is fully zero emissions, fully electric with double ocean vault sail drives. She has 51% flax in hull and structures, cork as a decking. She's got about 33 kilowatt hours of battery bank, which drive the boat. I'm going to be honest with you, she actually has an internal combustion engine on board as well. It's quite an advanced technology. It's a 25 kilowatt hour petrol turbine generator. The unit weighs about 50 kilos. And one of these days, it's actually going to work in real life. Now we can run it for 10 minutes at a time, but the manufacturer is hopeful that we'll get there soon, and the diesel version is coming. So we can see the technologies emerging, which actually makes the internal combustion engine more or less redundant, except as a range extender. Then, to be honest, where we really fall short from the mark is in reducing emissions when at a standstill. On Path, which is a recently launched 146-footer, we have some 60 square meters of solar panels on the coach roof. And this on a sunny day, it's going to give us about 2 hours off the generators. On the 117, on which we work quite heavily with optimizing the systems, each cabin has sensors. And when the sensor senses that nobody is in the cabin, it turns off the air conditioning, thus actually saving quite a lot. So I guess the message is sail more, spend less time in port. But drinking cold champagne in port is actually quite nice as well. So I think here we as an industry need to work a little bit harder to further create different avenues by which we can reduce standstill emissions. I'm going to switch tacks with you for a moment. In my opinion, the pandemic has actually accelerated the green transition. It's encouraged both introspection and maybe driven home the realization that this life that we have is really not a dress rehearsal. So if you have a dream, you might as well follow it now rather than wait for it later. And it's also made dreaming yourself away to happier times significantly more important when you're stuck in a lockdown somewhere. Because at the end of the day, this 0.003% of the population that I was referring to, they are humans too. And they want to be able to look their grandkids in the eyes and defend their particular consumption choices. And we've actually been able to validate this because sometimes in 2019, 2020, early 2020, when actually all other marketing avenues were pretty much shut down, there weren't that many tools left in the toolbox. We decided to shift everything to various digital platforms. And just to educate ourselves as to whether this shift in the market is real, we've run a test where we compare generic content to content which has a sustainable component is somehow green. And it was really interesting because we found that we get double the comments, 5 times more exposure, and more than double the rate of click-through on the green posting. So it's not scientific, it's sort of circumstantial evidence, but it does, to me at least, confirm that the market is really genuinely interested in this particular topic and this particular theme. So we're going to continue giving the market what they want in this respect. A couple of words about recent launches. The 146 was mentioned. Her major sort of sustainable component really is the solar panels that she has installed on her coach roof. The 117, really, systems are so complex that it's hard to explain them in bite-sized pieces, but suffice to say that a lot more energy was put into optimizing the systems and making them energy efficient, to that extent that it was actually recognized by the Boote International Design and Innovation Awards, where she is a finalist in the eco category. We are approaching the end here, so I guess it's time to wrap this up. And my main message really here is do the right thing. Because customers demand sustainable solutions. We have the technologies available, and future market shares, they are decided now. And we actually have quite a nice situation, because for once, the morally right thing to do is also good for your business. A little history lesson still before we stop. One of my favorite pictures, we've come full circle, we go back almost 50 years in time. The first Baltic ever built, Baltic 4601, the Queen Anne. She was sold here at the Hamburg Boat Show in October of 1974. She briefly went to Canada, from where she came back to Norway in 1978. She's still in the custody of the same Norwegian family who bought her in 1978. It's the son of the second custodian who now has her. She's never had a major refit, and he intends to take the boat on a circumnavigation. What other consumer product has a lifespan of 50 years and counting? What other consumer product is equally sustainable? Ladies and gentlemen, the future is bright green. We are Baltic Yachts, humble yet proud builders of sailing sustainable super yachts.
Thank you, Anders. Very impressive.